Hi, everybody. We're just going to do a quick audio test. If you could type yes into the chat box if you can hear me, that would be great. Thank you. All right, thank you for joining our summer CPE learning session series today, Technology Behind Payment Management for Nonprofits, Part 1. Today, Walter Merkas, Senior Manager in Withum's Cloud Solutions and Management Consulting Practice, will facilitate the discussion. Walter will open with the discussion with a walkthrough of modernizing your spend management technology and outline some of the challenges that not-for-profits are facing. And Brandyn Cook, a business development executive from Fenexio, will then lead a discussion on the future of work for finance teams in a post-pandemic era, and Devin Desmond will wrap us up. So before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Materials for today's presentation can be found in the toolbar located on the right hand of your screen. At the bottom of the toolbar, you will see a question box. All questions pertaining to the webinar content will be answered at the end. We will do our best to address them. Please be sure to answer all polling questions to ensure that you receive CPE credits for today's session. Once the webinar is over, there will be a pop-up asking you to complete a survey of today's session. Please take a moment to complete it. It is our way of being able to provide you with the best and most relevant programs possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wally.
Well, great, Ashley. Thank you so much, and welcome to my colleagues, Brandon and Devin. Nice to be on this panel with you and walking through today some AP automation and understanding what payment as a service actually means, because I think a lot of people struggle with the core concept of it. So, as we think traditionally of AP automation, my team typically would go in and do reviews and assessments, and we're trying to help companies streamline and automate the approval routing and the bills, getting bills entered, et cetera. We're trying to clean up and really streamline and get that in front of the right folks. And so we'll spend a lot of time on the technology, receiving those invoices, coding them properly, who's going to approve it, where does it go, and then the big thing is, three-way match and reconciliation and all those things. The items that I'm talking about are all things that we would traditionally see inside of the ERP, and we would try to find out where we can streamline and automate those processes. As we start to think about the accounts payable process, and we work through all of those areas, data entry, the invoice matching, as I just alluded to, the coding invoices, and the approval routing, we finally get to a place where we need to pay these bills. And what we're seeing in the marketplace traditionally is, we've gone through all that exercise, and then it goes to some payable clerk, and now the payable clerk has to go back through and then proceed with finding the vendor and paying that vendor. And a lot of times those suppliers might be challenging. We send a check, it comes back, it doesn't clear. There's all sorts of things that are happening. And in the marketplace today, we spend a lot of time talking about, digital payments and a process where we might have a different way to pay these bills. And Brandon, I'm going to tee up here a little bit, but, Brandon's going to share with us some ideas today as we get through that process in whatever tool you're using today, some folks are using Excel and then getting to this. Some folks are using more modern ERPs, accounting packages, and then getting to where you need to be. What Brandon's going to talk to us today about is we've now got approval to pay this thing. How are we going to do that? And what does payment as a service really mean? So Brandon, I'm not going to belabor this any further. Please share with us what the heck does payment as a service mean?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wally. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you just to Withum in general for giving us an opportunity to take part in this great event. Obviously, thank you to all the guests for joining. So, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of value to take away. And just a little bit before we get going, I did want to give you a little bit of background on Fenexio and on myself. So just a little bit on Finexio, which is leading the way, as Wally hinted at simplifying accounts payable payments. Just a highlight about our profile, some of the verticals and high-profile customers we work with, really around digitizing payments, helping them manage their payments, and all the service that he touched on that comes after that traditional AP process. As you can see, we are headquartered in sunny Orlando, Florida. I happen to be based out of what we call the Little New York City at our company, Cincinnati, Ohio. A personal bio background on me. So my name is Brandyn Cook. As Ashley hit on, I'm a business development executive here with Fenexio, but I like to think of myself as more of a CFO and finance team advisor and advocate, really helping explain the magic we do here for our CFOs, helping them eliminate inefficiencies, improve their processes. That's really what I'm passionate about, and it's exciting to be able to share that today. So just, feeding off my passion, what we're going to do today is reflect a bit on the events of the past year and a half, and really where we see finance teams going in the future, specifically in regards to, the changes in the workforce, challenges facing the modern finance team, the new technologies and the challenges that have still not quite been approached and fixed. And then lastly, how our Finexio's approach is really different and helps resolve those challenges. So, looking at 2020, an interesting year to say the least. I'm sure we're all probably a bit tired of talking about it, but it's good to come back and reflect, on the good and the bad. Really what we saw were a lot of new and some old challenges for CFOs and for their teams. I think some of the biggest adjustments that were really barriers to process improvements and digital transformation, but ultimately ended up serving as a catalyst, was that need to work from home. Companies had to rapidly adopt tools and methods to solve for that. Even early 2020, if you think back, I'm sure Wally and Devin, some of the conversations they had, it was hard to get through the status quo all the time in regards to digital transformation. But come March, it became rather necessary, and it became necessary right now. As it's related to the payments component, remote work had a huge impact here. As Wally hinted at, it relates directly to paper check. It becomes really hard to print and send these manual forms of payment from a facility when your team is not there every day. So we heard stories on a daily basis of CFOs and their team having to go into the office, once a week, every other week, just to send checks. And, I think we're all familiar with these challenges. But, if you think of the other side, it's hard having to, accept checks as well, or accept invoices, remittances. So it's something we're all familiar with, but it's good to reflect and to take care of these things right now. So, interestingly enough, our marketing team did a really good job of putting together some research here regarding what finance teams and leaders are doing and what they're doing moving into the future. As I hinted at in the last slide, digital transformation really seems to be one of the biggest buzzwords. I'm sure Devin's going to hit on it later. Wally hears it every day. This is what we're talking to Withum about all the time, as well as some of our other partners. It's just consistently ringing true. Additionally, we just participated in a major CFO conference just a few weeks back, and I had the opportunity to meet directly with 25 plus CFOs, and every single one of them had digital transformation as one of their few key initiatives. I just think the other thing to think about is the work from home thing we really see continuing. I'm sure, once again, Wally, Devin, they're hearing it all the time. We're going to have a polling question on it here in just a bit. But I see it continuing, whether it's a hybrid, if it's fully remote, whatever it may be. But, this puts really a significant amount of strain on finance teams, and not only to stay lean and not to restaff up, but really it's putting more of a demand on digital processes. And for us, really, and the purpose of today, a focus on digital payments. And if you think, you take a step back and, I think folks, most of you would agree that when you look at your back office shops, after that traditional AP process, there's a lot of room for automation there, a lot of room to improve efficiencies. And that's some of the things we're going to hint at today and what we really do well and help with. But Ashley, we have arrived to our first polling question. So if you want to go ahead and throw that up, that would be great. Really, let's just get a good idea of how your teams are going to be structured. Like I said, these are questions we're asking, pretty consistently in every meeting.
Great. So the first polling question is launched, and it's how will your finance team be structured in the future? So just make sure to get those answers in to get your CPE credit for today. All right, we're going to close that in just a second and share the results. All right, so it looks like, can you see it, Brandon?
I cannot see it, no.
All right, so the results are in, and we have 33% went with we are implementing a distributed or hybrid model workforce. And then right behind that is our finance teams will be returning to the office.
Okay, so nobody's staying fully remote. Good to see. Yeah, I'd say definitely the hybrid model is something that I see quite a bit. I think especially with the finance team specifically, us folks in sales, I think we're going to be back on the road. We're going to have, and operations is going to be back. But finance definitely seems to be, a hotbed for that hybrid model, which, I mean, it excites me personally. So not a bad thing. Moving forward, in 2020, early 2021, a lot of the conversations I had and our company had with CFOs were about, some big investments they made in different technologies, different softwares, but there's still some challenges that the technologies that they invested in frequently did not address. I think it's really important that we touch on those. So, first off, a lot of companies are still heavily reliant on these manual paper-based payments such as check. Even ACH at times can be really manual, wires, etc. Good example of this, I'm working with a CFO right now named Jason Wang. He just took over the role at a rather large company over 100 years old. And they had some old leadership in place. They're using a very old ERP system, just really, manual processes. And in our conversation, he stated they're actually currently paying their vendors 99% of the time with paper checks. I mean, still writing them out and stuffing them themselves. And they're managing over $300 million in AP spend. I mean, so this isn't just small companies, it's all over the place. A frequent question I get from some companies that are more up to date, is that still out there? Yes, it is. I know Withum sees it quite a bit as well. Another big challenge is that finance teams really just do not have time on their hands. Something that comes up all the time is that CFOs and their teams are just being asked to do more with less in all fronts. Another good example here, we just partnered with Brian Sandre. He's the CFO at Worldwide Produce. So a little different than nonprofit, but they are a large food distributor out of Southern California. And until partnering with us, which just took place in March of this year, he was spending hours each week physically signing checks. So imagine going through all of 2020, early parts of 2021, still having to go into the office in California, of all places, just to sign checks. But now we're happy to report Brian and his team are completely out of payments. And he no longer is spending hours each week signing checks. So that's good. And this leads directly as well, into a lack of visibility into your spend, in your suppliers. It's something, again, we're hearing all the time. And whether your people are working from home, you have too many vendors to manage, or you're lacking the reporting into your spend that you need, we can certainly help there. And then before we move on, the last thing I want to touch on, one of the biggest barriers today is there's still just really a lack of education around payments and payment products. Even though there's a big emphasis there, from executives, we're doing this, this conversation today. A big part of my job and our team's job is really educating our clients, our partners about what capabilities are out there today, making sure we're keeping them on the forefront. And that's really important in today's discussion and for the modern CFO. They're bombarded with so much information and so many different unique challenges. It's really important to stay up to date.
Hey, Brandon, just quickly, what's interesting is as I'm running around and we're talking about these payment options, folks are hearing about, the traditional ones that we've all sort of heard about back in the day is PayPal, like the international e-wallet type approach. Local e-wallets are coming up and being more prepaid debit cards, all of these, ACH, and you alluded to those. And I don't know for any of those folks on the call here, but try and get your ACH file to actually work sometimes is interesting as we go through and do a lot of support around getting those ACH files done. So to me, those legacy to modern, there's, as a CFO that's out there today, they're going to have all of these things in front of them and it's available to them. And I'm going to kind of throw a curveball at you here, but how does Fenexio deal with all of these different things? Or is Fenexio sort of piecing the layer between it? How is Fenexio going to help? Because they're already navigating these fields. I suspect most of the people on this call are doing one of those 4 or 5 things that I talked about on a regular basis. Why Fenexio?
Yeah, you're spot on, Wally, and we're going to hit on it in just a couple minutes. But to kind of answer it up front, really, if you're dealing with these products historically, you've probably dealt with a bank, I would say, most of the time. And you're buying a product from them, that's what they're selling. But really what you get with Finexio is all the same products, plus a few more modern products that most banks don't have access to. And we're actually going to facilitate those payment methods, work with your suppliers to convert them to that, which I'm going to hit on here. I really think is the biggest challenge, and what we spend the most of our time on. And then additionally, we manage that for you in a very efficient, ongoing partnership, type of relationship. So really completely different than what most folks are used to dealing with and getting from the banks. That's a great point.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep, spot on. Yeah, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in depth here in a couple slides. Before we get there, I think importantly, why now? Why urgency? And I think really CFOs, based on my experience, on our company's experience, and I know talking with Withum, that these CFOs and finance leaders really have a mandate right now to do more with less. We're coming out of a bit of a recession with COVID, trying to keep costs down, trying to stretch each dollar spent, holding the bottom line as the top line continues to grow. How do we automate? How do we do more with less? It's just really a key component. I'm not going to read every bullet here, but this is what we're seeing across the board in all industries. I think this applies well to nonprofits, and we hear it just on an ongoing daily basis. And I think importantly, AP is one of those things that would really be considered the low-hanging fruit that folks, time after time just don't realize how easy it could be to get a 6-figure cost savings in their back office with something that really doesn't require much of a tech lift at all and can have significant benefits outside of costs, around security, cash flow management, control, and visibility. Another component here that we have not touched on and what we're starting to see, in the past couple months is that businesses are really growing and they're starting to scale back up. I'm sure Wally, Devin are seeing that as well. Conversations we had just 6 months ago about trying to survive and save money are really different now. And we're having conversations on how to scale without doing things by hand, really trying to eliminate inefficiencies as these companies continue to grow. We just partnered, a good example of this, with a large metal stamping company. The metal industry is booming, construction's booming, there's increased demand. And they asked us, how can we do more, continue to buy more business, more manufacturing sites, hire more people, whatever it may be, and not have a process where we have people doing things by hand. It just seems crazy that we're in these modern times, we're growing rapidly, it just doesn't make any sense. And luckily for them, that's exactly what we do, is take you out of those manual processes. From day one, going live with Finexio, you will no longer be sending any manual payments at all. So, these are really the fun conversations I like to have. I'm sure it's the same for Withum. Instead of trying to find ways how to survive, how we're going to make it through it, now it's, the world and the economy are moving in the right direction. Let's find ways to do it better. Let's make sure that if, something happens again, that, you're not going to face the same things. Let's learn from our mistakes there's such a critical eye on this digital transformation right now. There's a lot of new blood in firms that I'm talking to. It's just so important. And, we know, Withum knows, there's not a single company out there that wasn't affected, either good or bad, by the events of 2020. But it's what are you going to do now to either avoid those same issues or to try to expand upon the success you had? That's really, these are the big differences and kind of the shift we're seeing. From there, I want to open it up to our second polling question, Ashley, and then we'll get back into it. So what are your biggest drivers when it comes to considering new technologies or services to better manage financial processes?
Alrighty, so the poll is launched. Again, just make sure to get in those votes. And this is the second polling question out of 4 that you just need to make sure you are responding to for the day. All right, we're going to close the poll. So we have 42% of the votes, excuse me, coming in at improved productivity, 38% for save time, and then under that is unsure other, and then 4% and 4% are cut costs and predictable cash flow.
Okay. Excellent. I think that feeds exactly, into what we're seeing time and time again. Here, I think this might be really the most important slide in this entire presentation. And Wally, this is exactly what you asked about. I think when folks are really thinking about AP payments, thinking about digital payments, the transformation around it, how do we leverage it? There's just not a lot of good information out there. And, these are some of the things we think about, obviously Withum thinks about from an advisory standpoint, but it's important to think about and evaluate it yourself. I would say the biggest mistake that most people make to think about electronic payments is they think about it from a standpoint of raw dollars and cents. How much cash back are we going to get from the bank? What is the dollar savings on our, cost per check, et cetera, et cetera. But I think really the most mature companies that are thinking about this in the most modern way are saying this is a foregone conclusion that we're going to save money. That's obvious. We know this is going to be really good, but the important part that Wally kind of set me up for is what really matters is how does this get rolled out and implemented operationally? In electronic payments, it really involves, as I said earlier, engaging with, in a very professional, systematic, and detailed way, thousands of companies and suppliers that need to get paid. And that's really the hard part. Your staff isn't built to do that. They already have so much on their plate. They only have so much time, and they're not trained on that aspect. If it was easy, all your suppliers would already be off paper and they'd be on to electronic payments. But it's just not the case, and it's really a grind, and that's where we step in, and our solution and our service helps on that piece, which is really the most difficult part when you're thinking about electronic payments. I really think this is a foregone conclusion, but it's just amazing that more time just has not been spent on those type of considerations, on the service and support and on all the critical information that really goes into, a success or a failure with electronic payments, instead of just thinking about it from a dollars and cents standpoint. So, we look at that poll, the majority is how do we become more productive? How do we save more time? What we do is a great way to do that. And it's the conversations we have. So, just to reiterate, when we work with folks that have tried electronic payments in the past, whether with their bank, a different firm, the #1 reason of dissatisfaction and why people come to work with Fenexio is because they don't pay attention to these critical details and they have major issues around the supplier side of the equation. You know, it's really something to think about here. You know, I'm happy to spend more time with folks, you know, after this. I think this is what a lot of my conversations are about. We have a ton of information and really good content around it. And certainly, you know, electronic payments are powered by software. And important to note, your bank is not a software company. Firms, you know, additionally, you know, some of the older firms aren't necessarily up to speed, you know, fintech firms on what people need in terms of onboarding, the ease of use, the reporting. There's just so much to dig in there and evaluate. You know, another big piece of our solution and our mindset going into it is that we work with, you know, larger billion-dollar-plus firms that have complex requirements, you know, multiple different softwares and technologies, all the way down to, you know, your smaller firms that really don't have a lot of money in IT. There's a lack of resources. I certainly think that's why Withum is such a vital partner, to give you access to some of those resources you may not have internally. You know, but because of that barrier, we knew we had to create a platform that enables company without those IT resources, you know, to be able to access our service. So essentially, you know, to you know, kind of simplify it, if you can use spreadsheets, access Microsoft Excel, use the internet, we can help you manage and deliver your payments and be very efficient around that, and really from day one take you 100% out of the payments business. And this is really completely different from what you're seeing with banks, from some of the older software companies out there that are really hinged on very complex integrations that take a lot of time. There's a serious tech lift. You know, of course, we have access to those integrations. We can work with any ERP system out there. But, you know, when we sat down as a team and said, who do we want to be as a company? Who do we want to help? We want to be able to approach every business that's out there, you know, from the large, complex, all the way down to the smaller firms. So these are really all the variables that are at play here, what you have to think about, and we really feel our solution does just that. So before we move on, we are going to move to polling question number 3, which will kind of feed into the rest of our conversation here. So Ashley, whenever you are ready.
All right, polling question 3 is launched. What percentage of your total AP spend is digital? Less than 25%, 25 to 50%, 50% to 75%, or greater than 75%. All righty, and we're going to close it out and share the results. So the results came in at 62% with less than 25%, and then right under that is 23% at for the 25 to 50% option, and then 15 at 75, greater than 75%, and 0% of the people voted for 50% to 75%.
Okay. Yep, not surprising at all. So, I mean, I think there's a direct need here. I'm sure, you know, I can't see everybody that's in attendance here, but I'm sure there's a need and a want to, that if you could get your suppliers onto electronic spend, you would love to have that happen. And I really think that's where we fit in. That's our need. That's the hard part. You see the value in it, but how do we do it? How do we get it done? That's where Finexio comes in. We do all that for you.
Hey,
So,
hey, Brandon. Just quick here. You know, Devin's probably got some more experience than I have even in this, but you know, as we go into our clients here with them and we're talking to them about that, a lot of time the pushback I get is, hey, our suppliers aren't interested in digital payment. They want a check. And in fact, they have controls around a paper check, which as accountants, we might challenge those controls around paper checks, but let's leave that side out of it. Devin, I don't know what your thought is there, but I get a lot of pushback on the digital side from some of our customers. Are you seeing that when you're talking to our customers?
I mean, I'm dealing more from the art side, but I've heard from the clients not dealing directly with suppliers, but I've heard that from their perspective, yes, that they're in contact with their vendors, and it's some pushback as to anything. I don't know if it's just resistance to change on their side, um, you know, but again, I feel like the digital world isn't going away. If anything, it's just coming on sooner. I think the pandemic's really opened their eyes on that. So,
yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it's something I hear frequently. It's really how often are you talking to your suppliers? How frequent is it? How consistent is the messaging? Are you talking to the right person? And at the end of the day, are you going to get everybody onto digital? We all wish you could, but it's just not going to happen. The good point is still, Fenexio is going to send all your checks for you too. So whatever is left over that doesn't get, converted to electronic spend, we're still going to handle that as well. So you will, from day one with Finexio, be 100% out of payments and sending any manual payments. That's the benefit. But with us, you're going to get the ongoing support and service. It's not one call and we're done. We have a dedicated team just for that reason. It takes time, and it takes convincing. It's more of an upsell sometimes than it is just here it is, take it. You have to really dig deep with these suppliers. Good. And then I think this slide here does a really good job of illustrating where we come in. I don't want to belabor it too much, but what's really interesting in what Wally, his whole introduction set us up on, is we really typically start where the AP process ends. Most of the companies that we talk to don't necessarily feel that the AP process is broken. Of course, there's some that is the case, but instead we really want to get out of the check printing and writing business. That seems to be the bigger barrier. So our thought was, let's just engage on the back end, so we do not have to interfere with what's already working, any tech that's in place. So once they know who they want to pay and how much, we can come in on the back end, really help improve those inefficiencies that have been such a challenge to eliminate. And then, as we've hinted at, just help with delivering and making those payments and the ongoing support around it. I think additionally, a frequent question I get, and I touched on earlier, is who are your competitors? And really out there, our competitors are the bank and doing it yourself. There's a couple firms in the marketplace that are, somewhat similar, but not really. And the big difference here is the analogy I like to make of doing payments with your bank or yourself is like going to the grocery store and trying to put together a really hard meal yourself. You have to go buy all the ingredients. You've got to follow the recipe exactly, and frequently mistakes are going to be made, whether it's your first time making it, you're inexperienced, you're short on time, you forgot a step, you forgot a product. It's just really hard to get it to go exactly to plan. Where with Finexio, it's really like going to that high-end fine dining restaurant where they already have all the best ingredients. We have the experienced chefs to cater these perfectly crafted meals and then deliver them to you with a white glove service. So it's about driving that outcome you're expecting 100% of the time and the all-encompassing experience. And I really think this is something that's been missing from payments. It's so focused on product. And that's one of the big things we've had a lot of success with. So this leads to our last polling question. Ashley, go ahead whenever you're ready. But the question is, what percentage of your payments are still made by check? So kind of feeding off the last one, just interesting for us to know.
All right. Last polling question is launched. All right, we're going to close it out. So most of the results, 61% of the votes voted greater than 75%, and then it dips off under there at the answer of 50 to 75%, and then 25 to 50%, and then less than 25. So we got 61% at greater than 75%. All these percentages floating.
Yeah. Voting percentages and then our percentage. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Ashley. And I think, it hits right back to our point. As I'm calling people and, speaking with them every day, their off the cuff answer is usually like, oh, we're not sending that many checks. But then you really dig into the numbers and it's not surprising, greater than 75% of your payments are still by paper check. It's what we see each and every day. As we look, continue to look at this, this is what we see day in and day out. Customers are experiencing an environment where they're spending 6 figures plus to run their payments. When you're sending that many paper checks, you're spending a significant amount of money, where working with us can really leverage hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings by just eliminating that piece, which, as we just saw, I think that poll is pretty consistent for most businesses in this country. They're just still really reliant on manual paper-based payments. We have some case studies I'll show at the end, and we're happy to share around this, but a good example is a client of ours, Morgan & Morgan, not necessarily a nonprofit, but where we were able to save them over $500,000 just in their payments, just getting them out of paper checks, and that continues to grow year after year. So I downplayed this earlier, but this really can be a big swing from a financial standpoint. It's nothing to shrug your shoulders at. And this financial impact is something to think through just as much as all the other benefits we talked about. And then lastly here, I really think the why this is so critical is because there's something in it for everyone, and it makes your team's life so much easier. That's what makes this such an exciting partnership. It's why I'm so excited to talk about it. All of your key stakeholders around payments, from the CFO down to your lowest level person, is really finding a win here and seeing this as a big positive. I hinted at this earlier, but the biggest piece of our conversation, and the poll showed it as well, with our current customers and CFOs, is really around time savings and productivity. It's less and less about the dollars and cents and the finances, more about how we can do more with less. How do we work from home? How do I scale? How do we become more secure? And how do I automate? And what we do, helps with all those aspects. And this has just really been a big win for all parties involved. And importantly, this has been a big shift from, your traditional banks and other payment companies that weren't talking about the outcomes. But what we really want, when I'm meeting with our clients, I want our CFOs and our finance teams to think about the outcomes they are looking for and their ideal end state. And when we do that, I think that end state is usually a place where they have cross-functional collaboration. They're paying their suppliers when and how they want to be paid each and every time. And they're automating as much of their back office tasks as possible, especially payments. So that's really, in conclusion, what has made us very successful, made the clients we serve successful. And I hope you have taken something out of today that will make your organization more successful as well. So that's really it for the slides. I'm going to pass it over to Devin here in just a second. Before I do, we do have some resources I'd be happy to send out to anybody on the call. We have an ebook more about ERP systems, how we help leverage your return on investment there. We're also doing not a podcast, but a webinar around that. And then additionally, plenty of case studies and material we'd be happy to send out. So I appreciate all the time, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Devin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brandon. Yeah, I just want to remind kind of all of our attendees, if you have any questions specifically for Brandon or Wally or myself, please feel free to just drop them right in the questions box, and we'll do our best to kind of answer them here as we're continuing along. So yeah, and just want to kind of then touch on just kind of the keys and what we're seeing from the audit side, and why this is such an important option for entities to kind of explore a little bit further, I think I kind of touched on it base, quickly before when Wally was reaching out to me. It's just, this move to electronic processes it's not going away, right? It's going to be here to stay. I think that's one thing we've all learned from the pandemic is, I think hybrid models are going to try and be embraced for as much as it can. I don't want to say, I feel like it's almost quickly becoming the new norm, but I could say from us at Withum, that's kind of the operating model that we're looking at, as well as really any client that I've been reaching out to in terms of looking to schedule audit work or things like that. So just kind of the ease of, to embrace that kind of organization wide, I think would just really be beneficial for really any entity. We've seen probably that easiest way to do that for entities to move at least one processes, either be it AP automation or through just utilizing a lockbox methodology, at least on the back team finance side, has really just been kind of key in starting to kind of roll and embrace some of those processes. So other things just to highlight here, kind of as Brandon was saying, most of that AP process is remaining the same. So for any entities that are worried like, oh, I have to go all the way through and redo all my controls and reevaluate my entire entity, it's really only one portion of that. So if you're dealing with a lot of programs and encodings of programs and making sure things are getting allocated correctly, that is all kind of remaining the same. It's just once you're hitting that payment process, right? So we're in the check writing process where that change would happen. So it's not a really heavy lift from an internal side. It's only one portion of that process that we're really focusing on. That you'd be surprised at how much time is actually wasted when you're thinking about queuing up checks, printing checks, and then making sure it's signed, getting everything together, mailing it. Other key issue to keep in mind is the fraud issue. I can't probably say, probably a good at least third of my audits, I would say, over the past 2-3 years, if not more, have had some issues where, it's just simply someone caught a check, changed a payee on check, or ripped the bank account number off a check that was mailed, and then we're tracking down the bank to try and get those funds reinstated, right? All simply because it's not a secure transaction, as we're dropping something in the post. And I don't know about everyone, but I don't know where my mail goes these days. I could definitely say that from even on the work side. Good luck trying to send a paper confirm in these days and expecting any sort of reasonable response. And then also then on our side, it's also kind of the potential findings we've also run into. It probably happens in more smaller environments, but I feel like some entities kind of bake in maybe a 2 signers on a check is kind of a internal control or of some level, right? If it's a smaller accounting operation, but the idea there that this still would allow that to kind of incur even in a remote situation, so you don't have that horror story of trying to make sure that the CFO and a board member are coming in to the office on the same date and same time so that they can both send a check and we can get it out in the mail. Or oh, it's an emergency payment, we gotta get this processed ASAP. Well, can anyone come in to sign this? Because it's just the AP clerk and the receptionist in the office, right? So it's really just as we're kind of seeing and evolving into this new normal, I really do think it would be really beneficial for all organizations to kind of get on board and really kind of look a little deeper into that. And then just the kind of really highlight the overarching goal. This is just the built-in inefficiencies, right? So, if you can take any of these overtly manual processes and automate them, then you're able to reallocate those resources you already have. So, whether that means, just being able to combine some roles or really give an AP clerk or any person within that department the ability, going up to the controller, to focus in on more key areas, right? Be that reviewing budgets to actuals or things like that, or really day-to-day operations rather than simply, like I'm saying, printing checks and trying to track down 3 people to sign them. So, I think that's really it from the audit side and what the key things to hit on. But like I said, if anyone has any specific questions, please drop them in the questions box. Or again, Wally, I know if you have anything additional you wanted to add there.
I think you nailed it. We see a lot of people spending a lot of time trying to clean up that process from if they're bringing in any kind of inventory or fulfilling a service and going from that fulfillment or that service delivery to an approval. A lot of time spent on that. Like, people spend a lot of money on that area, and companies spend a lot of money. And then when they get to the payment side, that side, we almost disregarded at that point from a tech standpoint, because to me it's out the door. I put them on some form of an AP automation tool that helps them with the approval routing, and I think from a tech standpoint we've cleaned them up. And then the reality is some of these things linger, and then they're not taking advantage of, say, pay early, the 1% discounts, the 2% discounts, et cetera, by automating that process. And a lot of times, I mean, I've not done the math on this, but a lot of times that's where I would spend my time, is how much time are we spending? How many discounts did we and did we lose out on? And does this service make sense to me if we're going and build a business case internally? So folks should spend time understanding the business case, and if Fenexio makes sense, at least have that sort of thought process as to how those funds will be paid for. Never want to say anything's free, but also want to say that we should take a really good look at that business case. And that's where we spend a lot of our time, looking at business cases.
And I think that might transition. So one question we have in here, guys, is so are there any industry statistics to recommend how much of an organization's budget should be allocated to operating software, especially in the current environment looking to digitalize operations? So Wally, I don't know if you have kind of a rule of thumb there, or I know it might probably varies industry by industry, but.
I think it varies industry by industry, and Devin, you'll know this better than I as to how much they're allowed to spend on the administration side, and some of this budget falls in under admin. And I think there's some ways that you can sort of work to make it almost technology as a service, if you will, and start applying a technology fee, if you will, to some of those services that a not-for-profit might apply. I'm probably stretching things, Devin, and I'm getting way out of my league here, so I'm going to stop right there before I get myself
It's definitely something I would say. Let's review contracts before we just start charging this completely to program side.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. But ways to do that. So when I think of how companies are going to sort of start taking advantage, and we go in and think about where those dollars and cents are, that's sort of how we're thinking. Business case first, and then get to how you might be able to drive that. Brandon, I don't know if you see that much on your side, because you're one step past that.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually the question of how much is it going to cost? I'd say compared to other, tech investments you've made, what we do is so inexpensive. Like, it's really not going to have a major impact on your budget. Our monthly fees are very low, and the transaction costs are pretty similar where you're going to get anywhere. So, you're really going to see a big decrease, I think, or you're going to free up more of your budget. It's rarely I don't know if I've ever had a conversation with somebody of like, we just can't afford this. That doesn't really come up. We're making money if the customer is saving money and generating profit out of their payments, is really how it works.
Right. And then on the tech side, just to close that out, if you're a tech-enabled company, like an e-commerce that doesn't have any stores, those folks would be closer to the 12, 15%. And then if you're a, bricks and mortar traditional company, and then I see varying, some people have 3%, 6%, et cetera, on these more traditional models. I'm sort of thinking somewhere in the 7 to 8% makes a lot of sense. It gives you a range. It gives you some innovation to think about on the front, and you're not constrained on the budget side. Obviously, you got to try and make that work, to fit within your budgets and things like that, and appreciate that might be tough at that number, but that's not uncommon for me to see in the not-for-profit space in those ranges.
So I will say, though, looking at the question, that was our only one submitted so far, so dried up the well there pretty quickly, other than the question on CP, which I'm going to let Ashley handle. So.
All right. So if Devin, what was that question on CPE?
Someone was just asking if they needed to answer all 4 polls to get CPE. They were having a technology issue on the first poll. I believe it might be 3 out of 4, but I don't want to speak for you. So.
Yeah. So if you just want to reach out to me directly, my email is acrompier@withum.com. We can talk through any of the CPE questions just for anybody in general. But you should be good. That's all I'll say. You should be good. If you got at least 3 done, then you're good to go. Okay. And other than that, if you guys have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to us directly. You can continue to drop questions in the box, and we can get back to you always. We pull the results, we pull anything that is dropped into the chat box there, and then we get back to you as soon as we can. So feel free to keep dropping questions. Still have another 2 minutes. But if you are ready to hop off, if our panelists are good, any closing comments, guys, or are we all good to go?
I think from my side, just once again, appreciative to Withum, give us an opportunity, get our service out here. It's great exposure. And to all you folks, you know, like I said, this isn't a heavy investment thing. There's not a hard sell here. This really has to be a partnership together for this to be successful. So, you know, if anything piques your interest, if you want to learn, I'm not going to hound you to death. It's not one of those situations. You know, it's got to be mutually beneficial. So I'd love to educate, you know, where I can, give you more information, whatever we can do to help. We're really here to do that. So, you know, I appreciate everybody's time.
Excellent.
Great.
Thanks.
And yeah, thank you to our panelists for coming on, Brandon, Devin, Wally, and for working with us today, Fenexio. You guys have been really great, and I think our audience learned a lot. So I'm happy to have been able to bring you on for the last of our summer series, almost at the end. The summer is sadly winding down. Everybody who was on the call today, there's going to be a survey that pops up when we close out in just a minute. Please answer the survey. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, there's actually a little box in there, small chat box that you can respond to the question. Are there any other topics that you would be interested in hearing about in the future? If you want to say that you would love to hear Brandon come back on again and talk about some other interesting things, just drop any comments in there. We always want to hear what you guys are looking to be educated on and to hear discussed, all for your benefit. So thank you everybody again. Thank you to our panelists and everybody on the line. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ashley.